The most common issue that I see or have questions about with privilege is people actually misunderstanding what it is that they purchase when they start in the privilege system on a book. So I want to show you exactly how it works and what you're buying. So hopefully you can make a good choice for yourself about whether or not to buy privilege at all and which tier to buy and when in the month to do it. So we're going to pretend that we have a book. It is updating 2 chapters per day, and it currently has 20 chapters in the privilege system. Right now, as the new month begins, the non-privileged readers are on chapter 105, and you have to decide whether you're going to buy privilege to read more chapters or not. So, the first thing to understand is that when you purchase privilege, you're not buying a chunk of chapters, you are buying access to unpublished material. So the first month of privilege, it feels like what you've done is essentially purchased yourself a mass release. You went, this month I'm going to splash out, I'm going to pay $10 and I'm going to get an extra 15 chapters or 10 chapters or 5 chapters to read. So you go into the system, you swipe right in the book and it brings up the chapter list. There's a big orange upgrade button and you hit that and it shows you the 5 different tiers available. The first one is called the sneak peek and it only costs 1 coin. And then each tier after that costs an additional 250. So if you haven't purchased any, tier 2 is 250, tier 3 is 500, tier 4 is 750. But what a lot of readers do is they go in and they buy tier 2 at 250, and then they decide they want to read more. So they hit the upgrade button again, and it's now offering them tier 3 for 250 because that's the additional amount that's the difference between the tiers. So if you don't understand why you might see tier 4 for 1,000 and then you go in and find the next time it's only 750, that's because you've already purchased some privilege, and whatever you pay into the privilege system is reduced for the later tiers. So you want to buy 10 chapters. So as normal readers are on chapter 105, when you purchase 3 tiers of privilege to get 10 chapters, you're immediately able to read chapters 106 to 115, which no one else who's not buying privilege can read yet. So it feels like you just purchased a big chunk to read, you have a good time, and then as the day moves on, you are, and the normal daily release occurs, you get 2 more chapters because that's how many chapters are releasing in this book each day. The thing that I want you to understand is that when you went in at the beginning of the day and you purchased the privilege and you got your 10 chapters, when the update for that day occurred and the publishing happened of 2 chapters that day, what happened was the whole system moved by 2 chapters. So now normal non-privileged readers can read chapter 107, and you've been given access to 108 to 117. You are reading 10 chapters in advance of the normal system, and you'll stay there for the rest of the month. But it feels like what you purchased was 10 at the beginning and then you just had normal publishing. The reason this is confusing is because on the second month it acts differently and people don't understand why. So I want to show you this scenario again, but this time as if you are resubscribing to privilege. So you subscribed in January, you got up to 10 chapters in advance. At the end of the month, you were up to chapter 105. 115, because you had 10 chapters in advance. And then the new month resets. Now, the first thing that catches people, especially in the USA, is that the system is resetting on the Singapore time zone and dateline, which means that for us, it's resetting at 8 a.m. Pacific, that's Los Angeles time, on the last day of the month. So January 31st of 2022 at 8 a.m. Pacific, the privilege system will reset. If you already had 10 chapters of privilege that you were reading, you are suddenly thrown back when you go into the book to chapter 105, and you're saying, why did I get pushed back? I've already read up to 115. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is, even though it doesn't look like it, you do still have, because you paid and unlocked the chapters and read them, you do still have access to chapter 115, whether you buy privilege or not. You can gain that access by being in the book, swiping right to bring up the chapter list. Below the upgrade button, there is a single line of text that says something along the lines of read previously purchased privilege chapters or something like that. And you click that, it will take you down and allow you for these chapters, but you had to have unlocked them. So my first piece of advice for you, if you are resubscribing or not to privilege, whatever is available to you in a book at the end of the month. So again, if you're in America, that's a full day early. So maybe the night of the 30th or the 29th, you go in, even if you're not going to read, pay to unlock any chapters that are available to you. Because then when the reset occurs, you've still got access to those chapters whether you buy privilege again or not. So that's just one tip. Now you've gotten to the chapter reset, you've been thrown back to 105. You can still read to 115, but you're not going to read anything else. And I press publish at the end of the day, and 2 chapters are published for everybody. Again, it moves down by 2 chapters. Now, without privilege, you're on chapter 107. But that doesn't do you a whole lot of good, because you had access up to chapter 115, and these chapters are still in the privilege system. You can still read them, but you haven't gotten anything new because you didn't buy privilege again. So you're getting frustrated because you want to read something new. There was a cliffhanger, you want to see what happened. The button says upgrade, and it's only 1 coin, so sure, why not? But now you've only got access to 109, and you were still at 115. So now, okay, well, it's going to charge me $250, but it says I'm going to get 5 chapters, so I'll upgrade. And you do. You click up to 5 chapters, but now it's only giving you to 112. And now you're getting frustrated. You're saying, hey, I spent, $10-15 last month. I had to 115. Now you've just charged me another $3 or $5, and I'm still not up to where I was. I'm not getting anything new. This is because what you bought was access to advanced chapters, not a chunk of chapters. So the way this works, if you haven't understood this previously, this is the easiest way I know to explain it. If you, for example, start subscribing to an online streaming, I'll say Netflix because that's the one that I use the most. The first month that you buy Netflix, let's say there's a particular show that you want to watch. So you pay your 10 or 15 bucks, you go in, that show currently has 8 episodes available, and you watch those in a binge on a weekend. Now it's releasing 1 new episode every week. So your first month in Netflix, you got to binge watch those 8 episodes, and then you got each week 1 new episode. When the new subscription occurs the following month, you don't get another 8 episodes, another new 8 episodes to binge. You retain the same access you had before. You're not getting any new content on that particular show until new episodes are released. That's exactly how Webnovel works, but new episodes are coming out every day, or at least they are on my book. So, now you have to choose whether it's worth it to you to pay to sustain your access. So you say, I paid to have 10 chapters last month. I'm going to do the same this month. So you pay on the first day of the month for the 10 chapters, you don't get anything new until that evening when I release 2 more chapters and they filter through. And then the day after that, I'll release 2 more and they filter through and you get those. So now your access is up to 119. That will happen every day. If you want a new chunk of chapters, you can choose to buy the next tier of privilege and then you'll get the difference. So you had paid for 10, but this month you've got a little bit more money. You decide you're going to pay for 15. You pay for 15, you only get to read 5 new chapters because you had already read and had already had access to chapter 119. That is how the system works. That's the only system that we have available to us as authors. And I know that that system doesn't work for everybody. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information so you can make a decision about when and if you want to buy privilege at all. First of all, the thing to know, if you've never bought privilege before in a book and you're thinking about doing it, the thing to understand is that you want to do that as early in the month as possible, preferably the first day of the month, because you're not just getting access to those 10 chapters or 5 chapters. What you're getting access to is also all of the daily releases after the day that you buy privilege. So if you buy privilege on the 1st of January in a book that does 2 chapters per day, not only do you get, let's say you bought 10 chapter access, not only do you get 106 to 115, you then get 2 chapters every single day, always in advance of everyone who doesn't have privilege or has a lower tier. You're always reading ahead of them. That means at the beginning of the month you got 10 and then you got another 60 over the course of the month because you bought on the first day of the month. If you don't buy until, say, the 15th, you'll get your 10 just like you would have at the beginning, but now you've only got 15 days left of the month, and on a 2 chapter a day book, that's 30 chapters that you're reading in advance of other readers. What you have to decide for yourself is whether that advance access is worth the cost. You have a couple of options. You can buy privilege, say in January, and then not buy it in February. If you bought access to 10 chapters of privilege in January and you don't buy it in February, it will take, on a book that has 2 chapters per day, it will take 5 days for these chapters to filter through. 1, 2, 3, 4, and on the 5th day, you're going to get on the 5th day, it's going to catch up to where you were at. So on the 6th day, when 2 chapters are released, you're going to get 2 new chapters. So if you choose not to buy privilege again, you'll have to wait 6 days for new content. But you're going to get exactly the same content. You don't get anything differently than the privilege readers in terms of what material is available to you. You just get it later. So that's your first option. Don't resubscribe. Wait until the chapters have caught up to where you had access and then just keep reading normally. What if you want to resubscribe but you buy a lower tier? You're still going to have to wait. At the end of January, you had up to chapter 115. When February comes, you've been knocked back to 105. You can still read up to 115, but you're not going to get any new chapters. So you say, you know what? I'll buy tier 2, which is 5 chapters. But wait a second, you didn't get anything new. Tier 2 is still only up to chapter 110, and you are up to 115. What's going to happen, and this is what confuses a lot of people because this is how they start the month. What's going to happen is you're going to have to either wait 3 days for 6 chapters to come out, which means that you'll get a new content then, because you were up to 115, now you're up to 116, so you had to wait 3 days, which is less than somebody who hadn't bought it at all. And then for the rest of the month, so that would be 27 days, you would get 2 new chapters in advance of when everybody else got them. If you buy the same tier as you bought last month, let's reset this. So we were at 105, you had paid, and at the end of January, you were up to 115. February begins, you get knocked back to 105. You decide, I'm going to buy the same tier as I had last time. I'm going to upgrade 3 times for 10 chapters. If you do that early in the day, on the first day of reset, you don't get anything new right away because you're in the same tier that you were in before. But later on that day, when I put out new chapters, you get those and your new chapters start. And for the rest of the month, you'll get 60 chapters in advance of when everybody else can read them. The last option is that you can buy a higher tier. Now, obviously, that's not true if you had the highest tier last month, but on the scenario that we've got, at the end of the month, when you had 10 chapters, you were up to 115. You got knocked back to 105. You decide you've got some extra money this month. You're going to buy 4 tiers. You get up to 120. But let's keep in mind, when you first do that on that first day, these are the only chapters you haven't already read. So when you bought that access, you were renewing your access to the first 15, and then you got the other 5. And you got to read those all at once. And then later that day, when I add new chapters, you get 2 more. So now, for your extra privilege, you've read those chapters that day, and then you'll get 2 more every single day for the rest of the month. Making privilege work for you. You've got a couple different options. If you want to not buy in the same book every month. I know some readers that what they do is because they've understood how the system works, but they want to have something to look forward to. They want some kind of mass release or new access. What they do is they keep several books in their library that they love. They only buy privilege on 1 or 2. That's all they've got the budget for. But let's say they've got 4 books in their library. So at the beginning of January, they bought privilege on 2 books. They got those big chunks of chapters to read. They got the rest of the advanced content for the rest of the month. Now the month resets. Now they put those 2 books aside. They pick up the other 2 that they love. They buy privilege on those, and they go through the same process. They get a bunch of new chapters to read at the beginning. Then they read the daily releases. They get their 60 chapters on each book for the rest of the month, and then they flip. So what you're essentially doing is alternating, because what that does is it gives time for the book to catch up to where you were at and then go beyond. And then because you're in the stockpile, when you go back to read the following month, you've got extra chapters to read. Kind of like when you first started on your first book. But let's say you really love this book. You don't want to put it aside for a month or for a few weeks to let it catch up. So you decide you're going to rebuy privilege. And let's say that you had already purchased last month the full tiers available. So now when you go in on the first day of the new month and you pay that money, all that's available to you is what you have already read. You're sustaining your access. But when I release more chapters later that day, then you're going to get those as well. And you're going to continue to receive those for the rest of the month. This is why I always encourage you, don't buy privilege at the end of the month. You don't get as much for your money. Do buy privilege at the beginning of the month, because you'll maximize what you get access to for the entire month. If you're thinking about buying privilege on a book, and let's say you have a membership or a budget, a way that you're accumulating coins to do that, hold on to your coins and don't spend them on privilege until the first of the month. So, you've been reading a book for a while, you really want to buy privilege on it because you want that chunk, but it's like the 18th of the month. And that's when your membership kicks in and you get 800 new coins and you're like, yay! My advice to you is don't buy it that day. Wait until, if you're in the USA, the last day of the month, or if you're elsewhere in the world, the first day of the next calendar month. Hold on to those coins, use them at the beginning, and then you don't just get the privileged tier, you also get the advanced chapters all month. And that puts you back into the choice then what you're going to do when you resubscribe. I hope this makes it a lot clearer. I hope it makes you understand and feel like you understand what you're buying and whether it's a good choice for you. As an author, I will never ever value a privileged reader more than a non privileged reader. I am humbled. I am genuinely grateful for the money you guys spend. But I'm most excited about sharing the story with you. So don't ever apologize to me for not buying privilege. Please don't ever feel like I'm not going to be interested in your comments if you don't buy privilege. You can speak to any reader who hasn't bought privilege in my books, and they'll tell you I'm just as attentive to the comments of the non privileged readers as I am to the privileged readers. At least for me personally, I'm grateful and humbled and honestly a little bit uncomfortable with the amount of money people spend on my books to get into this system. So I am truly thankful to you if you are a privileged reader on any level. But I don't want you to feel that that makes you unimportant if you're not. To me, the greatest joy about this whole thing is that you and I get to share a story that we both love and characters that we love. And whether you're doing that at chapter 100 or chapter 125 makes no difference to me. So please do what works for you and your family and your situation. And let's just have a good time. If you have any more questions, please don't hesitate. Ask them in the comments. I will respond as quickly as I can. Thank you for being a reader. Thank you for watching this. I hope it's been helpful for you, and I will talk to you again soon.